This podcast is brought to you by WRFL, Radio Free Lexington. Find us online at wrfl.fm. Catch us on your FM radio while you're in Central Kentucky at 88.1 FM all the way to the left. Thank you for listening, and please be sure to subscribe.
Hi, and welcome to From the Woods, Kentucky. I'm Renee Williams, and I'm here with my co-host, Lhotka. Today in studio, we have Billy Thomas. Billy is an extension forester in the Department of Forestry and Natural Resources at the University of Kentucky, and it's a pleasure to have you in studio today.
Thank you, Renee, Laura, for having me. I'm really glad to be here.
And we briefly talked about this in one of our extension notes about the Woodland Owners Short Course, but today we're going to describe it in detail. So kind of tell us what the short course is and why people should attend.
Sure. I am really excited to tell you all and your audience about the 2019 Kentucky Woodland Owners Short Course. This is a program designed for woodland owners here in the state of Kentucky, but really anybody else that has an interest in forests and wildlife and our natural resources and how we can manage them and make them more healthy and more productive.
So how long have you been doing this course?
The short course, as we know it now, has evolved over time. We started this program back in 2004, and it started out really it was supported by water quality grants. We got these grants to put on the program to educate landowners about practices that they could do that would help protect water quality. And again, that was in 2004. And since then, it's really morphed over time. While we still talk a lot about what landowners can do to protect water quality on their property, as well as what ends up in the drinking water of others downstream, we also cover a wide variety of other topics now. We focus a lot on woodland management practices that can be done, wildlife practices that can be done. And again, these are all oriented toward what landowners are trying to achieve with their property, so it can vary a little bit. And we've brought in a lot more partners over the years. And the format of it has changed quite a bit as well.
So what kind of format are you talking about here?
All right. So the way it currently operates is we have a full-day program on a Saturday in each region of Kentucky, in the east, central, and west regions of the state. And we move that around each year to a different county to try to make it as accessible to as many people as possible. When we first started this, the very first year, there was like 4 events that we had, and we broke those out across the state as well, and they had some overlap in the topics that they were covering. Then as we kind of moved and changed it over time a little bit, we went up to a total of 9 events at one point, where we were doing 3 full-day sessions in each region, east, central, and west, and that was a lot for us to do. Yeah. And it was a lot on our partners, too, to have them have that type of commitment. So we kind of scaled back a little bit and brought in a few more partners and made it just where it is now on these Saturdays. And another great thing about having it on Saturday, it makes it so much more accessible for people that work during the week, and we found that many of our potential audience really are still employed and can't get off as easily as they can on the weekend. So the Saturday format really seems to be working well. We bring in a lot of fresh faces each year, but the way we have it structured now, where you have 2 programming tracks, it also provides opportunity for people that have been to earlier programs to come back. So I'll talk a little bit more about it a little bit later, but we do have kind of 2 levels at each of these programs for different types of audiences. So it's really changed a lot over the years, and we feel like it gets better each year. And really, there's a lot of players that are part of this. It's not just UK Forestry and Natural Resources Extension. Although we coordinate it, we really work with and depend on a number of partners to pull this off.
And so who are some of those partners that you work with?
We have over 10 partners that we identify as contributing in one way or another. And these partners contribute in It could be in kind by giving personnel's time to teach. They could supply vans sometimes to help us move people around. They could also help out in other ways, buying materials or whatever. So they contribute in a wide variety of ways. Some of them help us advertise the program. So these are all important partners, but I'll kind of go over them. Of course, UK Forestry and Natural Resources Extension kind of takes the lead and coordinates it. So we're a main partner in this. Certainly the Kentucky Division of Forestry is a really critical partner as well. The Kentucky Division of Forestry, as we've talked about a little bit here on the show in the past, they're really one of the main people or organizations that forest landowners here in Kentucky can work with. Now, we've got some others, and I'll talk about them as well, but they have what are called service foresters that can come out and meet and work one-on-one with the landowner on their property. And that's really an invaluable service for these landowners. So Kentucky Division of Forestry is a big partner. They really are. We also have the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources. They, too, provide many services across our Commonwealth, but what they do for private landowners is they will send out a wildlife biologist and work with that landowner if he's interested or she's interested in attracting a certain species of wildlife, or they're just trying to make their place more wildlife friendly. These wildlife biologists can come and work with landowners one-on-one. So Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources is another really important partner. We also work very closely with the Kentucky Woodland Owners Association. They contribute in a number of ways to this program, and they also give us a lot of feedback on kind of the content that we're providing to make sure we're on target for Kentucky's woodland owners. We also use the Kentucky Association of Consulting Foresters, who is a group of private consulting foresters that work for landowners on an individual basis. And they contribute to the program. They talk a lot about timber sales and timber trespass issues, just because that's an area they deal with on a much more regular basis than many of the other players in the forestry realm. So they provide that intellectual content to the program as well. Then we also partner with the Kentucky Forest Industries Association. They've helped us over the years in a number of ways, but that's really where a lot of the wood that gets harvested from our Kentucky's landowners' properties ends up in the forest industry. So they're part of this. The Kentucky Tree Farm Committee, that's the group that oversees the American Tree Farm Program here in Kentucky. They contribute to the program as well. We also have the NRCS, which is Natural Resources Conservation Service. That is an organization that helps all landowners, really. And a lot of times people may think of them in a more pure agricultural setting, but they have a number of programs that are specifically designed to assist woodland owners in the management of their property or their woodland properties, whether it be for timber or wildlife or other purposes. They're really trying to address any conservation issues that we have. Water quality is really important to them, controlling invasive plants. So they're trying to find ways to get practices put on the ground. So we'll have representatives at each of these programs talking about these programs. And one thing about that is there's financial assistance available to help landowners do a number of the practices that we may recommend. We also partner with Kentucky State University. They have resources that they'll bring and make available for folks. They do a lot of work in kind of the small farm settings, and they also do a lot of work in the non-timber forest products. They have a lot of expertise in pawpaw production, but they do some other things as well. So they're another resource that we try to bring in and make available to landowners. And then we also partner with the Sustainable Forestry Initiative here in Kentucky. That's a group that's interested in trying to do things that make our forests as sustainable as possible, so they contribute as well. So those are some of the partners and some of the content that they bring to this program, and I think that really enriches this program. And I think one thing that landowners really could benefit from knowing is who to contact. You know, when they have questions, right? Knowing who you can get a hold of to address your issue, that's pretty powerful.
It's awful beneficial to know.
It is, because you may be floundering out there a little bit and not knowing where to go or who can help you, or even if there's an option for help. And I think that's one of the great things about the Woodland Owners Short Course is it makes those connections for Kentucky's woodland owners about who can help them do things on their property. So it works out really well.
Because all those people that you listed or mentioned, they're at the short course pretty much, most of them.
They really are. Almost every one of those have representatives at the short courses. They've been part of the local planning committees, and that's another thing that we do. We put together local planning committees each year for each region's program. And that involves the local resource professionals and involves local landowners and anybody really else wants to come and contribute to that program. So these local planning committees come together and they think about the topics that are really important for woodland owners in that region of the state. There may be issues that are going on in one part that aren't really an issue in other parts of the state. So we try to tailor them to what's important in each of these regions. So having that local involvement, I believe, really makes these programs richer and much more relevant to the woodland owners in each region. So if you're a woodland owner out there and you're thinking about coming, I would encourage you to come to the Woodland Owners Short Course in the region where your property is located, because the content will be kind of geared toward you and your property. Now, you may be an absentee landowner, and it may be a challenge, and that's okay. I think you can get information at the others, but they'll be much more tailored to each of these regions. So if landowners can do that, I think they would benefit from that experience.
Okay. So what counties are we looking at this year?
This year we've picked out 3 counties, and these are 3 counties where we have never had the Woodland Owners Short Course before, so it's exciting to bring it into 3 new counties. And we're going to start out on July 20th in Logan County. That's in western Kentucky, and we're going to be visiting a great woodland owner down there, Mr. Henry Duncan. Henry Duncan is a tree farmer, and he's been doing a lot of work. He's a former Tree Farmer of the Year here in Kentucky a number of years ago, I think 2008, and we're going to be touring his property. And that's another important thing about each of these programs, is that each of these programs we will have both indoor and outdoor, but we go see a actual woodland owner's property at each one of these. So July 20th, we're going to start out in Logan County, and then we're going to go on August 10th. We're going to be in Washington County. That's in central Kentucky. Springfield is the little town we're going to be in there. And then on August 24th, we're taking the show to Clay County, and we're going to be in Manchester. So again, July 20th, we're going to be in Logan County. August 10th, we're going to be in Washington County, and August 24th, we're going to be in Clay County. So those are the dates. They're spread out a little bit over time there, but they are going to go take place in July and August. So I'd encourage your listeners to kind of check their calendars now. We do have registration open as we speak.
Do you know how many counties you've been in over the past 15 years?
That's a great question. I do have a map. I don't have that total in my head, but I would say we're probably around 50 counties. It's been 50 unique counties of Kentucky's 120, and my goal over time before I retire would be to kind of fill in that map and have brought that program to every county in the state. And that's a good point too, Renee, because even if it's not in your county, we have found that landowners will travel a distance to come to this, and we appreciate that. We really do, and that's one reason we try to move it around so much, to try to make it as easy on Kentucky's woodland owners as we possibly can. So.
And you mentioned about the first landowner that you were going to see was a tree farm. And can you explain to the listeners what the tree farm program is for those that may not?
Sure, that's a really good point. So the American Tree Farm System is a program that's really been around for over 70-some years, and it is all about really encouraging sound, sustainable management of forest land. And so each state has a committee that oversees the implementation of that program in each state. And so here in Kentucky, we have the Kentucky Tree Farm Committee that oversees that. And what the tree farm program is all about, it's all about recognizing landowners that have done good practices on their property. They're working with the forester. They've shown that they have a real interest and drive to try to make their woods as healthy and productive as possible. But not only does it recognize them, the way the program is set up now, it also certifies them. So we're talking about forest certification there. And you all probably talked about forest certification before, but basically that's a third-party verification that, yes, you're doing what you said you were going to be doing on your property, and yes, you're doing it in a way that meets these standards that have been established. So if you're going to be a tree farm, an official tree farm, then you'll have to have an inspecting forester come out, visit your property. They'll review your management plan. They'll talk to you about what practices you've done, and they'll basically be checking to make sure that your management plan and the work that you've done in your property meets the standards of the American Tree Farm System. And once that happens, and it's really not that hard. If you've been working with a forester, it's pretty easy that you're following these standards. So if you meet those standards, then they will nominate you to become an official tree farm. And once you go through that process, then you'll get a nice sign recognizing you as a tree farm. You'll get a tree farm number. And the thing about that is the industries that are needing certified wood would then be able to kind of, get certified wood off of your property. And so it's a kind of easy way for landowners to get into forest certification. It really is. So it's a big program. We have over 600 landowners here in Kentucky, over 150,000 acres in tree farm land here in the state. And it's a program that, we're part of here at UK, but it also has many other partners across the state as well. So we feel like it promotes just good forestry and good timber and wildlife management management, and it's a good thing to be part of, and especially if you're interested in certification. So that's what the American Tree Farm program is, and the tree farm, how it's kind of implemented here in Kentucky. So yes, Henry Duncan is a tree farmer. He won that program. One of the things that we do each year with that program is we recognize the Tree Farmer of the Year. We also recognize the Logger of the Year and the Tree Farm Inspector of the Year. And, Henry won it a few years ago, and he's really a great steward. Henry also has been very active in the Kentucky Woodland Owners Association for a long time, but he's also really heavily involved in the agricultural community. The farm that we're going to see, his farm there in Logan County, is really a diversified farm, and we're going to be talking about that. I mean, there's cattle on the farm, they do crops on the farm, but they also do forest management and protecting water quality on that farm. So we're going to talk about how that all comes together there at Henry's place.
It shows that you can have a multiple of things.
You really can. And I think, that's one great thing about this program is it makes those connections, and it really shows a path for landowners to see how different practices can be compatible with one another. And it's really about getting the right information at the right time. Mm-hmm. It really is.
That's going to be a great example for them to come go visit.
And we're really excited about having Henry being the host of that local field portion, because Henry's so well connected in the agricultural community, and I think he can help us kind of bridge that gap a little bit, because sometimes our traditional agricultural farmers don't always play in forestry management, and that's and it's you can understand how that happens, right?
They might not think they have a role in it.
They may not think, they think most of my land's in row crops, or I'm mostly in cattle, even though maybe a portion of their property is forest land. So we really want to encourage them to think of that forest land as part of their farm. Obviously it is, but part of it in the management sense. How are you managing that asset that you have on your farm? So I think, landowners will have a chance, especially our agricultural producers, will come out and have a chance to see how that can work on an actual farm. And Henry's implemented a number of practices and worked with a lot of the different agencies that we're going to have there. So there's a lot to kind of see for landowners, and again, just so unique to be able to have an active ag farm, but also very active in the woodland and wildlife management side.
You've been listening to From the Woods, Kentucky with co-hosts Renee and Laura. We'll be right back after this short break.
Welcome to Wildlife Sounds from the Forest. This is Dr. Matt Springer. I'm an Assistant Extension Professor of Wildlife Management within the Department of Forestry and Natural Resources here at University of Kentucky. I'm here to teach you a little bit about the animals that live in our forests, especially those here in Kentucky. For those of you who might just be joining us, each week we'll play a wildlife sound from our forest. Here's our sound for this week. Stay tuned. Towards the end of the show, we'll talk about this animal and why it is making that sound.
Welcome back to From the Woods, Kentucky. Let's get back to our interview.
As I mentioned, we do have indoor and outdoor, and each one of these programs begins at that local county extension office. So, for instance, they're in Logan County. We're going to start at the Logan County Extension Office. I'm working very closely with Leanne Martin, the Ag and Natural Resources agent there in Logan County, and we're going to have the program begin there. And landowners will basically drive to there and then leave their cars there all day. We will have vans that we will use to take them out to Henry's farm nearby. It's only about a 10 or 15 minute drive. And we'll get out, we'll take them there so they won't have to drive there. They won't have to find that location or anything like that. We'll make sure they get where they need to be, and then we'll bring them back. So we do indoor and outdoor programming, and we do provide a lunch for that as part of the registration process. And we will also provide recipients a nice binder that is chock full of content that will help them manage their woods. It's got a lot of information. It's got a lot of flyers and brochures to these organizations and agencies. It's got contact information for the professionals that can come out and work with them. But it also has a flash drive on there that contains over 500 publications on various components of forest and wildlife management. So whatever you're interested in, we've kind of tried to compile that and make that really at your fingertips. So some of the other programs that we'll be doing, some will be inside and some will be outside, but one of the first programs we're going to do with what we call the green track, and I mentioned earlier we have these 2 tracks. Our green track is really geared toward landowners that maybe just getting started with their woodlands, maybe they just inherited it or just purchased it. They probably don't have a management plan in place, and they probably haven't really thought a lot about what they want to do with their property, and certainly probably haven't given a lot of thought how they're going to go about getting there. So this is kind of for people just getting started and inexperienced, if you will. So we have that green track, and then we also have a gold track for folks that have been managing their property for a while. They may already have a management plan in place and be working with a professional, but this gold track is really intended to try to give them an opportunity to increase their level of management and kind of going over some a little more advanced topics as well. So with that said, we have green track programming and we have gold track programming, and the field portion is pretty similar. It's just the way that they'll be kind of communicated will vary a little bit by the track that you're in. So for the green track there, we're going to do a program on tree identification, and we're going to teach people, and it's very popular, and it's a challenge here in Kentucky to do tree identification because we talked about this in the past, the diversity we have here. Well over 100 different native tree species, plus a few that have been introduced over the years, makes tree identification challenging here in Kentucky. But we're going to try to break that down for landowners so that they can have some skills that they can reuse when they're out there. Instead of teaching you this is a white oak tree, we're going to try to teach you how to identify trees. And we're going to do that by looking at tree characteristics. And that's a great program. It's really an opportunity for you to get a skill that you can then apply back on your property as well. And then we're going to have some folks from Natural Resources Conservation Service talking about an introduction to the programs that are available to help landowners. These are these financial assistance programs. So we're going to have somebody in there talking about what they are, how you sign up for them, and what they can do, and kind of all the details of that. And then in the morning, with that same green track, we're going to have a presentation on healthy woods. And we've got our own Dr. Ellen Crocker, who's going to be talking about what characteristics are of a healthy woodlands, what are the things that you should be looking for to kind of assess whether your woodlands are healthy or not. We're going to talk about some of the threats that are out there to our woodlands right now. Several. And then we're going to talk about some of the potential responses that you can do. So that will take care of our green track in the morning. And then after that, they're inside in the morning, then they go out in the afternoon. So in the morning, the gold track basically goes outside first, and they're going to be talking about a number of different things, but they're going to actually be out there with representatives from the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources, as well as the Kentucky Division of Forestry, and a consulting forester with the Kentucky Association of Consultant Foresters. So we're going to be out there in the woods. I'm talking about there's some of the practices that Henry's done there and how it's integrated really into a very diversified farm management system. We're also going to be talking quite a bit about riparian buffer areas. These are really important, especially in ag settings, to have those streams with trees on them and near them, and how you can do that in ways that really don't interfere with your farming operations. So we're going to talk about that quite a bit as well. And then we're going to talk about practices that you can actually see and do out there. And we're going to review some of the practices that Henry's done with the assistance of Kentucky Division of Forestry and Fish and Wildlife Resources. So that's going to take care of the gold track in the morning. And then in the afternoon, the gold track's going to get a quick tree ID refresher. It's going to be a short kind of refresher for some of those that have been through. That was requested by that local planning committee. And we're also going to have a small little forest health blitz. So it's going to give Ellen a chance to kind of talk to the gold group about some of the things that are going on right now in Western Kentucky, forest health related, just to kind of bring them up to speed and make sure everything's good. And then we're going to have Dr. Matt Springer talking about wildlife in woodlands. One of the things I think is shocking for a lot of landowners is that you could really have both wildlife and timber management practices practices be very compatible with one another. So Matt's going to talk about how these practices not only can benefit timber production, but how they can also benefit wildlife. So he's going to go over a bunch of different practices that can be done. He's going to be talking about how wildlife use woodlands. Not all wildlife use woodlands in the same way. And certain practices may benefit one species while really hindering another. So we're going to get into that a little bit. And we're going to also talk about kind of some trends of what's going on with wildlife in that region. So I think that's a great opportunity for those folks to understand that wildlife-woodland compatibility. And then we're going to also have NRCS wrap up that indoor portion there, talking about the programs that are available for these landowners that really are a little more advanced, some of the financial assistance programs that are available to them, how they can participate in one program, how you get out of a program, kind of a little more higher level, if you will, on the programs. And one of the things that we've got going on out in western and somewhat central Kentucky is a program that was CREP. It was an NRCS program, and it was basically putting in riparian buffers to try to protect water quality. So that's a program that's since expiring, and people are coming out of that program. So I think a lot of landowners in that part of the state are wondering, what do I do with this land as it's coming out of this program? So we'll talk about some of that as well with that. And then we're going to wrap up the day with a presentation from a consulting forester on timber sales and timber trespasses. And these are issues that are kind of always happening at some level. Many landowners may think they're never going to sell their timber, but I think as we've talked here in the past, what we have found is really all woodlands get harvested at one point or another. They're going to get cut. If you don't cut them, somebody else is likely to cut them at some point. If that's going to happen, we want to do it in a way that is as healthy and as productive for that woodland, not only today but in the future as well. So there's things that you can do to make that a better experience and really set that forest up to be healthy. So we're going to cover that for both groups. And we think that's important because a lot of times that's our first really contact with landowners, is when they call and say, somebody was wanting to buy my timber. What should I do? And so we want to try to get ahead of landowners before they have those conversations and have those thoughts. So I think it's something that really benefit them, not only today, but their property really going forward for sure. So that's kind of our program there, and on July 20th in Logan County. Again, I think we've got a lot of great content for folks out in western Kentucky to really learn a lot how they can take care of a big important part of their property out there.
So you have two other programs as well. Are they similar to what you've mentioned?
There is some similarities with the programs, but again, we try to have
region-based.
So there's some nuance. So some of the things that we would talk about, maybe from a forest health standpoint, may differ a little bit, and from a wildlife standpoint, will differ from region to region. So it kind of moving east, I guess, if we will. On August 10th, we're going to be in Washington County. That's our Central Region Woodland Owners Short Course. And again, that's at the Washington County Extension Office, and they're hosting us there. Been working with Dennis Morganson. He's the horticulture agent. He's my contact there at the Washington County office, and we're going to start the day there on August 10th, and kind of similar. You'll have the green track going on, and the gold track will be outside, and then we'll all eat lunch together at the Extension office, and then we'll flip the groups again in the afternoon, and then we'll wrap it up again with a kind of timber sales trespass talk at the end of the day. So for the green track there, they're going to learn about tree identification as well. That'll be kind of similar to the other one. We probably hit a few different species as our examples that we'll be talking about there. But we're also going to be talking about generally forestry and wildlife assistance that's available. We'll introduce what these management plans we keep talking about. What's this management plan thing you keep talking about? We'll break that down, what it is, what the elements are involved in a management plan. We'll talk about who can help you get those management plans, and then we'll kind of talk about how that might work in with some of those NRCS programs I was talking about earlier. And then we'll also be talking about healthy woodlands as well in that one. But again, kind of the focus will differ a little bit in central Kentucky from western Kentucky. And then outside, we're going to be talking about some cedar management. We're going to Danielle and Jason Hagler's farm. Danielle is actually the 4-H agent in Nelson County, but they own a farm on Willis Lake, and Washington County, and we are using her property as the field portion. So big thanks to Danielle and Jason for opening up their property to us. And they have done a number of practices on that property in their really short time of owning it. So we're going to go out and see some of those practices. But one of the things they have on there that a lot of other landowners in central Kentucky have is they have quite a bit of cedar on that property, eastern red cedar. And it's one of our few kind of native conifers that we have here in the state. And so they've got some different issues that they're dealing with on that. And so we'll talk about that a little bit, about what you can do and how you can manage that cedar. And also we'll talk a little bit about how cedar is sold here in Kentucky. It's a little bit different than the way most of our hardwoods are sold. So we'll also be talking about woodland trails and roads and some of the best management practices that can be done. You know, sitting there right there on that lake makes really whatever they do from a water quality standpoint very important. So we'll talk about, you know, when you've got that really valuable resource of that lake there, you know, what practices can we do in our woods to help kind of keep that lake as clean as possible and not let some of their soil end up down in that lake. So we'll talk about that. We'll also talk about deer management. That's a big thing, and certainly in central Kentucky, not only from I'm trying to attract more, but I'm trying to get rid of them. You know, so we'll talk about the different ways of that. And we have Mr. Joe Lacefield. He's a private lands biologist here in central Kentucky. He's going to be down there talking about what landowners can do from that deer management standpoint. You know, it's also an opportunity, just because we may not be covering a topic, if landowners had questions, you know, it's really easy for landowners to get specific questions answered, even if they're beyond kind of the scope of what we were talking about there. So I want to, you know, encourage the landowners to think about that. Come with questions and hopefully leave with answers.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's kind of the field portion of that. And then in the afternoon, we're going to be talking about invasive plants, ID and control. Certainly in central Kentucky, we have an abundance of invasive plants that are really threatening our woodlands, and they're causing a lot of problems. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about how you can identify them, but also how you can control them. We'll talk about wildlife and forestry practices, their compatibility, and you know, where they make sense. And we'll also have a program on NRCS programs to assist management activities. So again, similar, but with a twist for central Kentucky, really some different topics there.
So you've mentioned a couple of county extension offices and agents. How important is it for landowners to call their and get to know their extension office?
I think it's invaluable for landowners to have that relationship with their local county extension offices and their agents. You know, many listeners probably are unaware that we have a county extension system here in Kentucky, but really those county offices are really satellite offices of the University of Kentucky and Kentucky State University. So we have a footprint, if you will, in every county in Kentucky. And those organizations or local county offices are really doing everything they can within their power to help their community. You know, they're trying to make that community as healthy, not only from a physical health, but from an economic health standpoint. They do a lot on economic development activities. Our farmers use them a lot for soil testing and plant identification and getting up-to-date content on how to do farming operations. But they can also learn, like we're learning here, about forestry and natural resources and other topics. Most of these offices also have horticultural agents, like Dennis in Washington County is working with us. He's the horticulture agent there. And they can help on a wide variety of not only kind of commercial production issues, but also like yard issues if you're having problems with plants and stuff in your yard. So family and consumer sciences is another important thing. So healthy eating, healthy finances. Our family and consumer science agents work very hard to help make families as resilient as possible, and they do it in a wide variety of ways. So landowners need to know their county extension offices because they benefit from that relationship. They really do, Renee and Laura. I think if we could get more people interacting with their local agents and getting involved, I think it could really heighten and expand the impact that these local offices are having. The other reason I would say is because landowners can get questions answered at the county extension offices, and then they can get help. So if they're dealing with an issue, even if that office doesn't maybe address that issue, they can often point that landowner into the appropriate place to get the assistance they need. So it's a local resource that really can be invaluable to what you're trying to do on your property.
Well, it's just like if you're wanting to do some kind of forestry thing and they don't know, they can get in contact with us and we can get back with them.
Indeed, yes. And we try to keep the county agents really involved and engaged in all of our programming as well. And they get hit in a lot of different directions, but they're a great resource locally. So, I would encourage all listeners to kind of get to know that office. It's an asset for that county for sure, but it can also be an asset for individual landowners as they're trying to make their properties better.
You've been listening to From the Woods, Kentucky with co-hosts Renee and Laura. We'll be right back after this short break.
Welcome back to From the Woods, Kentucky. Let's get back to our interview.
So the next date is what?
The next date on our series here, as we continue our march east, is on August 24th.
And this is the last one.
This is the last of the year, and we're going to be down in Clay County at the Clay County Extension Excel Center. So that is, they have another office. So Clay County has their extension office, and then they have another facility called the Excel Center, and it's right in town. And that's where we're actually going to be meeting there in Clay County. And we're going to be visiting Mr. Jimmy Sizemore. He is a tree farmer as well, like Henry, and he is also a board member of the Kentucky Woodland Owners Association. He also came through our Kentucky Master Woodland Stewardship Program. He has been doing everything that he can on his property to make it very healthy and productive. He's also really engaged in a lot of other non-timber forest product practices. He does some maple syrup, he does some honeybees, he does some shiitake mushrooms, he does some fruit tree plantings. He's got a lot going on his property, and I think people will be really surprised at the diversity of stuff that he has going on his property there in Clay County. So we're excited about that. A number of the topics are really quite similar again, but they have that eastern flavor more so than the central or the west. One different thing that we're going to be talking about there is we're going to have Dr. Amanda Gumbert, who is one of our water quality specialists here at the University of Kentucky. She's going to be doing a program out in the field at Jimmy Sizemore's farm, how landowners can assess the water quality on their own property. So she's going to give them some hands-on skills on how they can go about that and get them connected to those resources. So we're really excited to have Dr. Gumbert be part of that program. And, we're going to be talking also a little different there on this program compared to the other two. Is we're going to have a session on non-timber forest products. So we have a representative from the Kentucky Maple Syrup Association is going to be coming and talking about maple syrup production. A lot of landowners may not realize it, but maple syrup could be a potentially viable option for some landowners. Interesting enough, we have more and more maple here in Kentucky, and it's more and more red maple, not sugar maple. Now, from a maple syrup standpoint, typically sugar maples will have a higher sugar content than red maple. However, since we're going to have many more red maple probably than we have sugar maple, we're also interested in how we might be able to be tapping some of these red maples. And I've actually heard anecdotally from some farmers that some of their red maples can be as sweet as some of their sugar maples. So there might be something different going on maybe here in the climate or the soils here in Kentucky that's making that happen. But we'll be talking about maple syrup production. We'll also be talking about keeping honeybees and what you need to know about getting started with that. So we've got somebody that's coming from the state level on that and the state apiarist office to talk about honeybee production as well. So, other than that, we're going to be having some wildlife talks. We're going to have some NRCS talks there about these programs. We're going to be doing the tree identification as well. And we're just going to go and look at some practices there at Jimmy's place. And I think landowners will get a lot out of each of these programs. And again, I would encourage you to try to come to the one that is in the region where your property is located. But if you can't, for the scheduling reasons or your calendar conflicts, we would love to have you at any of these programs. And people can find out more information about this program by visiting our website, ukforestry.org, and just look for our programs, and it's the Woodland Owners Short Course. It should come up pretty quickly for you. So we hope we'll get a great attendance, and we hope we'll see some new faces out there this year.
And for those of our listeners that might be listening to a podcast or maybe after the event has happened. This is something that you do every summer time frame?
It is. We
Okay.
try to typically do it in July and August because we couldn't find any hotter months. No, it is a hot time to be out. It really is. But it's also a time to where we can typically get a lot of the agency people to be partners. We have to avoid our spring and fall fire seasons. Because we just can't count on our agency people to be available. So we basically, that's taken that window of time away from us, and we've kind of locked down that August and September time frame. So yes, it'll probably be warm. We'll have lots of water for everybody. So, but I think the amount of content and the connections that landowners can get out of that single day can have lasting benefits for them, their family, and their woodland property, and eventually really all of Kentucky. So you really owe it to yourself. You owe it to your family. You owe it to Kentucky to come out and participate in the Kentucky Woodland Owners Short Course.
Now, do people have to register for this, or they just show up?
They need to register, right? Because we're providing materials, we're providing lunch, so we need to make plans accordingly. So registration is available online, or they can call, and we can take registration over the phone. They can call us at 859-257-7597, or again, visit us online at ukforestry.org. Look for our programs, and you'll quickly find the Woodland Owners Short Course.
And we can put the link on our
Yes.
website.
Yeah,
as
please
well.
do, and maybe put the brochure where it has the detailed topics on there as well, just so your listeners can learn about it and then sign up for it.
Right, exactly.
So the information is great, and it sounds like an excellent program. And I know we've mentioned this before, but just talk a little bit about how many woodland owners are here in Kentucky and why they're so important.
Great point, Laura. Most of the forests in eastern United States are privately owned. Once you kind of get on the other side of Mississippi, we have a lot more public land. But here in the eastern U.S., it is mostly private owned. And Kentucky's really no exception. We estimate about 89% of the forest land in Kentucky is privately owned. And that's 89%. The rest is, a little bit of national forest. You have some state forests. You have some state parks. You have some military bases. Other than that, it's really all privately owned. And the vast majority of that privately owned forest land is by small family forest owners, a husband and a wife, or siblings, or a little trust has been left the property. About 78% is what we estimate are kind of in that family forest owner category. So from a number standpoint, the estimates are well over 400,000 owners in that group. We know that that represents over 155,000 ownerships here in Kentucky. And again, an ownership could be one person, it could be 2, 3, 4, 5, but once you kind of work out the math, it's well over 400,000 people have some ownership of forest land here in Kentucky. So that's a lot. And this program is really intended to try to connect them with information that they can use on their property, but also, just probably more importantly, connect them with those agencies and resources that are out there and can help them really get the most out of their property.
When people register, if they're a husband or a wife or a brother or sister or whatever, they could attend both tracks if they wanted to. Is that right?
Yes, we really encourage couples to come. It would be great if the whole family could come and that's involved with that property, because ultimately we all need to be in on it together, right? So yes, it's set up in a way that encourages couples to attend. And just as you mentioned, if you wanted, you could one of the individuals in that couple could go to the green track and the other could go to the gold track, and then you could compare notes, and you would really get the full offering of the day that way. Everybody will get the same binder and have the same files and all of that stuff, but the content will be a little bit different based on the track and where you're at in the state as well. So it's a great way if you can spend the day apart and then come back together and compare notes. I think you'll really kind of get even more out of
You get a more rounded day if you do both.
You will. Yeah, get all that content. So again, I encourage your listeners, and if they know of anybody that's a woodland owner, let them know about this. Please share the word. We're really just trying to help Kentucky's woodland owners have healthy, productive woodlands, really for whatever objectives they're trying to achieve. We just want to try to help them because we all benefit from healthy woodlands. We've talked in the past about how important our woodlands are. Certainly from an economic standpoint, they're important, but really from an ecological and an environmental standpoint, they are the lungs of the earth, and we really need them to be functioning healthy, and they are really important from a wildlife standpoint. They provide a lot of habitat for many of our wildlife species. They help clean our water. There's just so many benefits that our forests provide, and if we can help landowners have healthier forests, we all benefit. So please let somebody know. Encourage them to come to the Kentucky Woodland Owners Short Course. It'll be a day they won't forget, and a day they'll get a lot of information out of.
All right. Well, thank you, Billy, for joining us today. If you'd like more information on what you heard on today's segment, visit our website at www.fromthewoodsky.org. Stay tuned now for Wildlife Sounds from the Forest. You've been listening to From the Woods, Kentucky with co-hosts Renee and Laura. We'll be right back after this short break.
Welcome to Wildlife Sounds from the Forest. This week we have a guest with us to talk about the sound we heard earlier. Today we have Lori Thomas, Extension Forester within the Department of Forestry and Natural Resources, and she's going to tell us all about this sound that you hear now.
All right, so that definitely sounded like a bird.
Absolutely, yes. This is a great bird. This is the Yellowbreasted Chat.
Okay.
And a chat, we call it a chat, maybe because it's chatty, but it is actually a warbler. But it is the largest of the warblers that we have. If you saw this guy, it's not as large as a robin by any means, but it is definitely
half the size?
Maybe a little bit more than half the size. Okay. This bird, if you can see it, it tends to be a skulker as well. It's going to be in shrubbery and whatnot, where you got thick tangles and dense thickety type material. But if you can get it out, and you'll be able to see it. It's big enough. And it'll sit there and sing. It has this very cascading song, sounds, gurgles, cackles, chuckles. We always called him kind of the crazy bird because it's kind of a crazy, their calls can be kind of all over the place. But it's a very a very distinctive bird.
Okay. So where do you find this bird?
They tend to, like I said, they're skulking. They're going to be in that dense thicket material. If you were to go looking or listening for one of these around Lexington, Raven Run is a great place to go to. Big enough area. McConnell Springs, just not quite enough vegetation, enough contiguous vegetation of forest or thicket type areas.
So they need bigger places.
Right. Whereas at Raven Run, these are great to find those out in their open meadows that there's some trees in and whatnot. You'll hear them, and then hopefully you'll get to see one. Sometimes if you make a kind of a pish, pish, pish sound, it'll come out onto an edge of a branch, and you might get to see one of them.
So just tell us a little bit more about their songs.
Okay, well, as you kind of heard, it's crazy. It's kind of all over the place. The male performs this an extensive and kind of actually very loud series of whistles, rattles, cat calls, grunts, like we said, kind of crazy bird. And this is when you can find them a lot of times, when you hear one of them singing, because that male's going to be out hopefully on the edge of a branch, perched, really projecting that sound out there. So it's like I said, it's a very interesting bird to find when you're listening for it. You can probably pick it out, and then if you can see it, it's great.
So what's their migration patterns?
These are long distance migrant. So they're going to migrate in the winters in Central America, and then they're going to fly either over the Gulf of Mexico or up over through Central America, up through Texas and whatnot, into this area. We have them here in the summer months. They are a warbler, so they are a migratory bird. They'll be here while the food is here. They nest here, and then as food becomes more scarce, they've raised their young, they will then fly south again for the winter, for their wintering grounds.
So speaking of food, what do they eat?
Here they're going to forage mainly. They like spiders and insects and beetles and all kinds of
That's
you know,
good.
bugs. Exactly. The things that some of us maybe don't want around. They love to eat that. But they will also eat fruits and berries, strawberries, blueberries. So if you've got those out in your yard, probably wouldn't necessarily find one of these in a suburban area unless you're adjacent to a large park. I mean, if you've got raspberries and stuff like that, they're known to eat those as well.
And so you said they were in the warbler family?
Right, yeah. They're placed in what's called the New World warbler family, even though it's an unusual one because it is larger than the other warblers, and it has a much more varied repertoire in its songs and calls. That's the crazy bird sounds, compared to a lot of our other warblers who have a very set, distinctive call, like we've heard with the Kentucky warbler and some of those. A very set, distinctive call. This one's much broader. But they are considered a warbler, but they are large. And ID purposes for these guys, if you are lucky enough to see one, get out on a branch or down at Raven Run, hiking up through that meadow.
Right.
You see one out on a branch, like we said, it's larger than your typical warbler, but not as large as a robin. And they're kind of bulky. They have a long tail and a relatively large head with a thick bill. That's make you go, that's not a warbler. Warblers tend to have very fine bills. These have a much heavier bill. They tend to be olive green above, so on their back, but then they have a bright yellow chest and really bold face markings. Their face is gray, and they have a white eye ring that actually connects, so it looks like they have little white glasses or spectacles on.
Oh, okay.
So, and even the males are known to have kind of a mustache or stripe bordering on their cheek. The lower part of that belly, as it goes into their tail feathers, will be white.
I guess hence the name where you said yellow.
Breasted chat, right.
Yeah.
It has that bright yellow breast, right, exactly.
Okay. Also, we haven't mentioned about their mating habit. What are they? Some birds stay together and others don't. So how does that
Well,
work?
that's an interesting thing because there was a study done here in Kentucky on these, but it's what they found here in Kentucky is that 1/3 of the nest of yellow-breasted chat nest contain at least one chick sired by another male. But for the most part, they tend to be monogamous through the breeding season, but sometimes maybe not so much. They think some of the reason for the monogamy is the female aggression helps enforce that monogamy. So they
Works for me.
But it says, from the Kentucky study, they found that infidelity does happen. And in fact, like we said, about 1/3 of the nest from that Kentucky study had a chick that was sired by at least one other male. So kind of interesting.
Well, thank you for coming in and talking about this
Yeah,
bird.
and hopefully you'll get out someplace and hear this kind of crazy bird call this summer.
Great, thanks.
Thank you for joining us today. We have a new show scheduled for summer 2019. You can listen to us live on WRFL Lexington 88.1 FM on Thursdays from 10 a.m. until noon. And at 10 a.m. we'll be playing a new episode. Then at 11 a.m. we'll play a show from our archives. So stay tuned to 2 shows this summer on Thursdays. If you miss our show on Thursdays, you can listen to all of our podcasts on our website at www.fromthewoodsky.org.
Hey there. If you're enjoying this podcast from WRFL Lexington, you may enjoy our live radio stream at WRFL.FM and, of course, via radio at 88.1 FM in the Central Kentucky area. We have a wide variety of programs you're sure to enjoy. Just go to WRFL.FM/schedule and see what programs appeal most to you. Thanks again for listening to this podcast from WRFL Lexington.